A god and a demon went to learn about the self from a great sage. They studied with him for a long time, and at last the sage told them, "Thou thyself art the being thou art seeking." Both of them thought that their bodies were the self. "We have got everything," they said, and both of them returned to their people and said, "We have learned everything that is to be learned. Eat, drink, and be merry. We are the self. There is nothing beyond us." The nature of the demon was ignorant, clouded, so he never inquired any further, but was perfectly satisfied with the idea that he was God, that by the self was meant the body. But the God had a purer nature. He at first committed the mistake of thinking, "I, this body, as Brahman, so keep it strong and in health and well dressed, and give it all sorts of bodily enjoyments." But in a few days he found out that this could not be the meaning of the sage, their master. There must be something higher. So he came back and said, "Sir, did you teach me that this body is the self? If so, I see all bodies die. The self cannot die." The sage said, "Find it out. Thou art that." Then the god thought that the vital forces which worked the body were what the sage meant. But after a time, he found that if he ate, these vital forces remained strong. But if he starved, they became weak. The god then went back to the sage and said, "Sir, do you mean that the vital forces are the self?" The sage said, "Find out for yourself. Thou art that." The god returned once more and thought it was the mind. Perhaps that is the self. But in a few days, he reflected that thoughts are so various, now good, now bad. The mind is too changeable to be the self. He went back to the sage and said, "Sir, I do not think that the mind is the self. Did you mean that?" "No," replied the sage. "Thou art that. Find out for yourself." The god went back and at last found that he was the self, beyond all thought, one without birth or death, whom the sword cannot pierce or the fire burn, whom the air cannot dry or the water melt, the beginningless and birthless, the immovable, the intangible, the omniscient, the omnipotent being, and that it was neither the body nor the mind, but beyond them all. So he was satisfied, but the poor demon did not get the truth, owing to his fondness for the body. This world has a good many of these demonic natures, but there are some gods too. If one proposed to teach any science to increase the power of sense enjoyment, he finds multitudes ready for it. If one undertake to show mankind the supreme goal, they care nothing for that. Very few have the power to grasp the highest, fewer still the patience to attain to it. But a few also know that if the body be kept for 1,000 years, the result will be the same in the end. When the forces that hold it together go away, the body must fall. No man was ever born who could stop his body one moment from changing. Body is the name of a series of changes. As in a river, the masses of water are changing before you every moment, and new masses are coming, yet taking similar form. So is it with this body. Yet the body must be kept strong and healthy. It is the best instrument we have. This human body is the greatest body in the universe, and a human being the greatest being. Man is higher than all animals, then all angels. None is greater than man. Even the Devas will have to come down again and attain to salvation through a human body. Man alone attains to perfection, not even the Devas. According to the Jews and Mohammedans, God created man after creating the angels and everything else. And after creating man, he asked the angels to come and salute him. And all did except Iblis. So God cursed him and he became Satan. Behind this allegory is the great truth that the human birth is the greatest birth we can have. The lower creation, the animal, is dull and manufactured mostly out of tamas. Animals cannot have any high thoughts, nor can the angels or devas attain to direct freedom without human birth. In human society, in the same way, too much wealth or too much poverty is a great impediment to the higher development of the soul. It is from the middle classes that the great ones of the world came. Here, the forces are very equally adjusted and balanced. Returning to our subject, we come next to pranayama, controlling the breathing. What has that to do with concentrating the powers of the mind? Breath is like the flywheel of this machine. In a big engine, you find the flywheel first moving, and that motion is conveyed to finer and finer machinery until the most delicate and finest mechanism in the machine is in motion in accordance. This breath is that flywheel, supplying and regulating the motive power to everything in this body. There was once a minister to a great king. He fell into disgrace, and the king, as a punishment, ordered him to be shut up in the top of a very high tower. This was done, and the minister was left there to perish. He had a faithful wife, however, and at night she came to the tower and called to her husband at the top to know what she could do to help him. He told her to return to the tower the following night and bring with her a long rope, a stout twine, a packed thread, and a silken thread, a beetle, and a little honey. Wondering much, the good wife obeyed her husband and brought him the desired articles. The husband directed her to attach the silken thread firmly to the beetle, then to smear his horns with a drop of honey, and to set him free on the wall of the tower, with his head pointing upwards. She obeyed all these instructions, and the beetle started on his long journey. Smelling the honey before him, he slowly crept onwards and onwards in the hope of reaching it, until at last he reached the top of the tower. When the minister grasped the beetle and got possession of the silken thread, he told his wife to tie the other end to the pack thread. And after he had drawn up the pack thread, he repeated the process with the stout twine, and lastly with the rope. Then the rest was easy. The minister descended from the tower by means of the rope and made his escape. In this body of ours, the breath, motion, is the silken thread, and laying hold of that and learning to control it, we grasp the pack thread of the nerve currents, and from these, the stout twine of our thoughts. And lastly, the rope of prana, controlling which we reach freedom.